All right, welcome everybody. I'm getting my webcam started here. Here we go. Okay, you should be able to see me and hear me now. And while we're waiting for some other people to get logged on, I would love if you could complete a little poll that will come up in just a second. I need to pull it up. There we go. All right, what do you hope to get out of this webinar? So while other people are logging on, if you could complete this poll here, you should be able to type your answer directly in to the box, and then we'll see your result, but your responses are anonymous, so nobody will know what you say. So please be honest. And you should be able to hear me. If not, I don't know how you'll let me know. You can put something in the chat if you're not hearing me. Hopefully you would figure that out. And this session is being recorded. Last time the recording didn't seem to work though, so hopefully this time it will. We'll wait another minute to see if we can get any more responses here. What do you hope to get out of this webinar? So far we have learned more about project-based learning. I hope you will too. Anyone else? Going once? There we go, okay. Ways to motivate staff and students to take on the challenge of PBL. Great, okay, ways of motivating staff and students, very good. I am new to education and I am so looking forward to gaining a better understanding of PBL. Also, how can we keep kids engaged and curious? So 2 about motivating and engaging. I'm going to make a note so I can remember to address that. Engaging students. Okay, small group, so hopefully you will interact with me as we go along. So I want to take a little minute, I'll hide this poll away, to go over this Adobe Connect format. You can see me up in the top right corner and hear me. I cannot see you and I cannot hear you, but there are ways for you to interact with me. There's this chat box where you can chat. There's also little icons, and there's a note at the bottom for how to use the icons. Up at the top of your bar, there should be a little white icon of a person holding his or her hand up like this. If you click the drop down arrow right next to it, you have other little icons for raising hand, agreeing, disagreeing, stepping away, etc., etc. Angela has just raised her hand, and let's give this a go. Let's practice. Everyone set your little status person to agree. Look at that. Yep. Okay. Oh, look. We've all done it. Carrie has the, oh, look at that. Okay, now to undo it, you just click on that icon again up at the top, and then it'll clear it. Lovely. So really quick, let's see. Who attended Educating for Careers? If you attended, click agree. If you did not attend, click disagree. Okay, cool. And you can clear it. Fun. Most of us attended Educating for Careers. Elizabeth, I'm sorry you did not. It was great. And if you have a question, please feel free to type. And you can raise your hand by letting me know you have a question so I can pause. I see Elizabeth is typing. So go ahead and ask your question while we continue moving on. Okay, hold on 1 second. I have a knock on my door. Okay. Elizabeth, my team was able to go though, so that is how I heard to join you. Got it. Great. I'm so glad you're with us. Okay, a little bit about me. My name is Lacey Boatman. My name on here shows up as Region 3 Technical Assistant Team, but I am Lacey. I work at the Napa County Office of Education in our CTEIG Region 3 Technical Assistants, and I have a background as a CTE teacher in the classroom with a lot of project-based learning experience, which is what brings me to you today. My goals are that you gain a deeper understanding of what high-quality project-based learning is, that you see how project-based learning is rigorous and relevant, that you understand what mindset needs to be in place to make PBL work and work well, and that you leave with a lot of tools and resources. So before we go on, I have two little polls for you. I'd like to know what your role is, since I shared mine, so I know who I'm talking to here. Teacher, admin, CTE coordinator, counselor, or other. And if you're an other, go ahead and type what your role is so we know who you are. And then I have one other poll about what you hope to get out of today. I just need to pull it up. Here we go. Oop. Oh no, I'm sorry. I already asked that. Oh, ignore me. My brain is somewhere else. We already got your wonderful responses of what you hope to get out of today. So we have two others. You're in a room with admin and teachers, I'm assuming. I think, Carrie, you usually are with other people, which is wonderful. CTE coordinator, teacher, admin, and teachers. Great. That's awesome. Carrie, can you tell us how many people you have in the room with you, just so I know about how many people are here? And Elizabeth, I'm at 5. Okay, awesome. That brings our wonderful total from 4 to 9. That's great. And Elizabeth, I think you're typing your role. Wonderful. We'll hide that away. Okay, as we go, I'm going to reference a lot of different people, knowledgeable people and companies and groups about project-based learning. I'm not just going to talk to you about one methodology. I'll reference New Tech Network, New Tech High School, which is the first school part of the New Tech Network, Buck Institute for Education. Both New Tech and Buck Institute are really well known for project-based learning. High Tech High does a lot of wonderful things. I'm a little obsessed with them. Expeditionary Learning, High Quality Project-Based Learning, which is a newer group. We'll talk a bit about design thinking. And then there's 3 books I'll reference throughout today, or this little time we have together. Rigorous PBL by Design, which all 3 of these books are newly released in 2017. One of them might have been 2016, but they're all newer. Empower, about empowering students, and Dive into Inquiry. So I'll read some quotes to you and reference these. And I'm referencing a lot of different things because everything really does connect to everything else, as the wise Da Vinci said. And I think it's better as educators that we expand our knowledge as much as we can by learning what's out there, and then we make the most informed decisions for ourselves. So there's not just one right way to do PBL, although I will talk about the mindset that you should have. There's a lot of different ways, and we need to figure out what works best for us in our own setting. And Elizabeth, you're an integrated pathway coach and new CTE teacher working at Sonoma County Office of Ed in the Department of College and Career Readiness. Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so another little ranking. How familiar are you with project-based learning? Think about that while I pull up the poll. There we go. So 1, not familiar at all, to a 5, extremely familiar. What is your familiarity? Carrie, you can answer multiple times. We'll just see it jump around. Or you can average out your group. So pretty familiar, middle. Anyone else want to respond? We have 2 so far. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Not familiar at all? Sold. Okay. That's good to know. So my why. Why am I talking to you about this today? I strongly believe that to implement project-based learning well, you need to have a mindset, not just a method of teaching that you've nailed down. It's really about your mindset as a practitioner and as an educator more than it is about how well you implement a teaching method. So that's why I'm presenting to you. We will talk about what project-based learning is, the rigor and relevance of it, but I'm hoping what you take away is the mindset that's needed, or a change in mindset that's needed for project-based learning to be implemented well. And I also believe that while our educational system does need some big changes. We don't have to change the entire system in order to give our students a different experience. And this quote is from this Empower book. And I'll read a little more from this book. You may have tests you are required to give. You may have curriculum maps, bell schedules, and a set of programs that often push compliance over empowerment, but you are still the one who can transform the learning space. If you're a teacher in the classroom, you are the one to innovate. You are the one who spends hours with your students, and even more so for administrators. You are the one that can change your school culture and your school setting. Coaches, you're the one with direct impact and contact with your teachers. So even though there's big systemic changes that need to happen, we don't have to change that entire system in order to give our students a different experience. So I hope you feel empowered. Okay, what do you think project-based learning is? Before I start jabbering on and on, go ahead and type into the chat this time instead of a poll. What do you think project-based learning is? What does it mean to you? So I'll give you a couple minutes to think about what is project-based learning. Some of you are pretty familiar with it. So go ahead and tell us in the chat what PBL means to you, or what you think it means. Maybe I'll put a little timer on. And give you a minute or two to think and give us your response. What does project-based learning mean to you? Learning experiences that are collaborative, student-driven, and actionable. Students learn while solving a problem and work as a team. Yep, those are right, Elizabeth. We'll wait for you to finish up. PBL to me means that students are engaged in a dynamic classroom based in inquiry that deals with relevance and authenticity. Excellent. All great answers. So a little bit of the why from Buck Institute about why PBL. Project-based learning is an effective and enjoyable way to learn and develop learning competencies required for success in college, career, and life, which very much aligns with our reason for career technical education. And like you said, project-based learning is student-centered, inquiry-driven, and the project is what drives the learning versus learning being done for a project. The project, the problem being solved, is what drives the learning. So this chart demonstrates that a bit more of what I just said. A traditional project, a culminating project, looks like teaching being done with the project on the end. So you might lecture, you're giving students information so that they can complete the project. That's traditional. In project-based learning, the project comes first and really drives the learning. So you launch the project by asking some kind of an engaging question or posing a problem, or you have an authentic task that launches learning and drives what students need to know. And then along the way, you have teaching, you still have activities, you might even have lectures, workshops, you can still have homework and research and labs. You still have good teaching, but they're followed by reflection, and you're often meeting benchmarks to get to that final culminating event. So benchmarks are like the stepping stones that you need to accomplish in order to complete a high quality final product. And then that culminating event should be authentic, an authentic demonstration of deep learning with reflection again at the end. if you click on this image, it will open up another tab for you. And if you do that, when you come back into the Adobe Connect form, you do not need to log in again. You should be able to just re-enter through the little icon on your taskbar on your computer. It'll let you figure that out. And some of you are on this. I'm going to share my screen really quick so you can see the second page of this document, because some of you are on it and some of you are not, and I want to make sure you all can see this. So let me open a share screen. And here we are on this document with the graphic. And then the second page is a chart that highlights examples of traditional projects and what they might mean versus how it looks in project-based learning. So a traditional project is mostly teacher-driven versus in project-based learning, it's mostly student-driven. I won't go through every single point, but this is a great resource for you. You or your teachers can reflect and kind of check off where you think you lie. And it's okay if you lie all in the project category. And you can look at what you might need to do to make it more project-based learning, or if you have areas that might fall in both. That's okay too. This can be a good reflection tool. Projects have end products that are all the same, like the traditional missions, right? Mission project, they all create the same mission, versus in project-based learning, the end products are all different because students have inquiry and creativity and are creating different products to solve whatever problem they're addressing. So it's a great little resource for you. Let me go back into our presentation. And before I move on, are there any questions about this document that we just looked at? I don't know why that's highlighted in green. That's interesting. Okay, I'm going to move on then. So I have a little video, and I do believe I need to share my screen again since I learned playing videos directly in here do not work so well. So I'll reopen that share screen. And while we watch this video, think about what stands out to you, what resonates with you the most between the difference between a project and project-based learning. This video kind of highlights what that difference is. So think about, in your mind, what really stands out to you as the big difference between doing a project and project-based learning.
Project-based learning, or PBL, functional approach that helps students master content and skills through authentic, real-world experiences. However, PBL is more than just doing projects. For example, if we want to teach students about wind energy, we might first talk to them about weather patterns and the physics of a wind turbine. We could take them to visit a wind farm and then head back to the classroom to put together model kits. It seems like good lesson planning, but what's missing is the inquiry, creativity, and relevance that are essential for active learning. Now, suppose instead we start the project by asking a compelling question like, how might our community prepare for a sustainable energy future? And then guide the students through a meaningful journey of uncovering content to produce a genuine solution. What is sustainability? Would wind energy be a good fit for our community? How well do wind turbines work? This approach encourages digital thinking, where students leverage multiple resources like community and global experts, online articles, and field research. It also encourages artful thinking, where students must create, craft, test, refine, and present a high-quality solution to an authentic audience. All the while, students are reading, writing, speaking, and listening just like experts in the field. It's an open-ended challenge that empowers students and better prepares them for the world beyond school. So how can you engage your students with high-quality project-based learning? To find out more, give us a call or visit.
Okay. All right, while I pull this back up, what were your, oh, sorry, I didn't see I'm sorry, I didn't see you needed it turned up. It was difficult to hear. I'm sorry for that. You have the link here, so you can rewatch it on your own, and you'll have access to this presentation at the end. I'm sorry, I couldn't see our chat while it was playing. But let's see, Elizabeth took away uncovering content through inquiry versus giving the students all the answers in the beginning. Yeah, and that it highlights too that chart we were looking at. Same thing, versus giving all the answers, all the information. They uncover it as they go versus us giving them the answer. That's great. I'm sorry, I apologize that it was difficult to hear. Still working on all the tech glitches that come along. But it is there for you to rewatch if you'd like to. So you may have heard project-based learning or problem-based learning or inquiry-based learning. And if you Google all of these terms, you might find definitions that have some differences. To me, though, there are little minute differences, and the big idea of all of them is the same. They're all talking about student-centered active learning that's focused on questioning, critical thinking, and problem solving. So we often will hear math or science people talk about problem-based learning, where students are working on a problem versus a project. But the big idea is still the same. It's, if we're going back to this chart, it's the problem that is guiding the learning versus a big, large project. It might be a problem, but often projects are problems. So to me, the concepts are the same between all three of these. Okay, bringing it back to you just for a second. As I pull up this poll, think about what quality do you think the project-based learning is that you are doing if you're a teacher, or that you are seeing from the teachers around you, either at your school site or in your county if you're at a regional level. So think about what quality project-based learning are you doing or seeing. 0 for if you're not doing project-based learning at all, and then a 1 very low quality to a 5 extremely high quality. And again, these polls here are anonymous versus the chat where we can see your name. So be honest in these polls. And this is a chance for you to reflect on what quality PBL you think you're doing based off of what we've seen so far. And it's okay if you think it's low, or if you're not doing PBL. That's why you're here, right? You're here to grow and to get better. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? All right, I'm hiding it away. Thank you for being thoughtful in your reflection. So I'm going to start talking about some of the big players in PBL and what they think high quality PBL is, or what needs to be part of high quality project-based learning. This group, HQ PBL, is newer. They're supported by the Project Management Institute Education Foundation and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. They're also sponsored by Buck Institute. And they're really interesting because yesterday they released a framework for high quality PBL. I have not had a chance to read through it in depth, but if you go to their page, and I'm not going to share my screen this time, it takes too long. They have a framework that you can download that I've sent out to some people. And again, I haven't had time to go through it thoroughly, but I would be happy to set up a collaborative webinar if anyone was interested in collaborating around the framework. You know, it could be 30 minutes to an hour if anyone wanted to talk about the framework and talk about what it means. I'd be happy to set that up. I've had a couple people express interest in that. So if you're interested in that as well, let me know. You can type it into the chat and I can facilitate that. So the framework has more information on each of these 6 items, but this group identifies that 6 important pieces of high quality project-based learning are intellectual challenge and accomplishment, authenticity, public products, collaboration, project management, and reflection. And if you want more information on these, go to that framework. I would love to talk about them in depth, but we don't have time in a 1-hour webinar. So that was high quality project-based learning. The 6 A's of PBL, which you might or might not have heard of, are from the New Tech Network, but they didn't create them out of thin air. They adapted them from somebody else's work and research, which is what we all do in education, right? It's how we make things better. We steal and borrow and beg. So the 6 A's: authenticity, academic rigor, applied learning, active exploration, adult connections, and assessment practices. There's a lot of commonalities with those and what we just saw. Authenticity is verbatim the same. Intellectual challenge and accomplishment is similar with academic rigor and even assessment practices. Public product has to do with authenticity, maybe even adult connection a little bit, and assessment practices. Collaboration, yeah, that might not be it's spelled out, but I think it is embedded in some of these collaborative learning. Project management and reflection. Project management is pretty unique to the Project Management Institute, and the reflection is built into the 6 A's along the way. As part of assessment practices, active exploration, applied learning. Okay, then we have Buck Institute, gold standard projects. So again, Buck Institute did not create these out of thin air, and they actually revamped these. And I forget what year it was, but they used to have 7 things that they identified, and they recently, in the last few years, rebranded into gold standard projects because they were finding that many people were implementing project-based learning and it wasn't really high quality. So they looked at what made gold standard high quality projects, and they identify these things as challenging problem or question, sustained inquiry, authenticity, which we see again, student voice and choice, reflection, which we saw previously, critique and revision, and public products. So a lot of these are the same as that first one because Buck Institute is part of this group. And with the 6 A's, there is a link to a resource down here for you with more information on each 6A. It's the 6 A's project idea rubric, and it has more information on each item. Buck Institute, this is a checklist. It does not have, it has a little more information on each item, but it's a nice tool to quickly assess your own project or to work with a teacher to assess their project, to just go through and, you know, thumbs up that you're meeting that category, thumbs down, or a question. So that's a nice little checklist. And this is a graphic from Buck Institute. The project design elements that we just looked at also aligned with project design teaching practices. So they highlighted not only project design elements, but teaching practices that should be met to have gold standard PBL. And those are design and plan, align to standards, build the culture, manage activities, scaffold student learning, assess student learning, and engage and coach. And both circle around key knowledge, understanding, and success skills. Okay, then we have through lines, and these are from High Tech High down in San Diego, and there's a link to a project design kit with some more resources from them. And their through lines are concepts that they deliberately weave into the fabric of their projects and their teaching practices. They identify them as voice and choice, equity and diversity, reflective practice, and passion. So there's a lot of commonalities in all of these and some differences. I'll go back through, but I'd like you to think about, from all those that we saw, what do you think the most important aspects of PBL are? So think about this, and you'll add your thoughts to the chat, and I'll go through one last time so you can see what everyone else identified those groups. But think about, to you, what are the most important elements of project-based learning? Because you could really create your own little set of bullets, or adopt one of these others that have already been created, or just identify what you as a practitioner or a coach want to focus on. Maybe it's one item. So what do you think the most important aspects of project-based learning are? And I'll go back through really quick. These are the through lines. And I'll come back to this again. These are the gold standards from Buck Institute. These are the 6 A's from the New Tech Network. And then the high quality PBL list of 6. And I'll go back through one more time. So I'll leave it here for few more seconds. Six A's again. And feel free to respond to other people too in this chat. We can create our own little dialogue. Gold standard projects from Buck Institute. Through lines from High Tech High. Okay, so we have voice and choice and reflective practice, quality driving question, student voice and choice, equity, authenticity, purpose, voice and choice and a challenging problem or question, collaboration. I think I often see that authenticity is missing, so that is something that I think is important. I also like voice and choice and active exploration Great. There's no wrong answer here. This is why I present you with what a lot of other people think, so you can figure out what resonates with you the most in your area, either as a teacher or as an administrator or coach. Okay. So what these things might actually look like in practice, and I'll read through this, but feel free to add your own thoughts into the chat if you have ideas of what it might look like. It should look like, what it should look like, might look like, students working together to solve real problems, and teachers working together to solve real world problems, and students and teachers working together to solve real world problems. It's not isolation of students or of teachers or of student and teacher. It's everyone collaborating together. Student empowerment of learning, so students own their learning. They might even drive a project concept. Student voice and choice. An example that I just heard on NPR in Santa Rosa from the coffee, I forget the name of it, the area where all the homes burned in the fire. There's a math teacher who teaches a makerspace class as well, and her students actually came up, this teacher's house burned in the fire, and a student came up with the idea for the class to do a project where they all built model homes based on the teacher's original floor plan, and they're finishing it up now, and the teacher is going to choose one of the designs to move forward with and bring to an architect. So that's an example of student empowerment where the teacher gave students the opportunity to have empowerment over their learning and their projects and have voice and choice. Looks like researching, reading, writing, discussing, creating. Those good teaching practices do not go away in project-based learning. It's not students willy-nilly solving problems or creating dioramas. There's still research, reading, writing, discussing, and creating happening. Students are exploring and experimenting. The teacher is modeling, doing guided practice, checking for understanding. Again, those are good teaching practices. Those don't go away in project-based learning. It should be inquiry-driven. You should see and hear students asking questions and not always getting the answers from the teacher. You might see workshops that are targeted for specific learning outcomes. So that could look like a teacher delivering a workshop for a small group of students in the overall class, or maybe another student delivering the workshop, or you have an adult from industry coming in to deliver a workshop. And that leads us into students working with adults. So this is the adult connections. This could also be called work-based learning if we're in the CTE realm. They're the same thing. And students could be working with adults virtually, in person, along the way, giving feedback, or for a final presentation where the adult is in the audience. You'll see critique and revision. It should not be a one and done where students try a project and their first time at the final product is it, because it's usually not very good. There should be time for critique and iteration and revision so that that final product is high quality. And that leads to an authentic culminating event with a public product. If it's not authentic, your student work may not be as high of quality. So if you are seeing low quality student work in project-based learning, there might not be enough critique and revision so that they can have a high quality product at the end for a real purpose. Or if you're having students do a project but they're just presenting to the class and the teacher, then you might not see as high of quality work either, because it's not as relevant or meaningful because it's not authentic. Once you put that authentic context, a real situation, students really step up their game because they don't want to be embarrassed having low quality work with their name on it in a museum somewhere or in a coffee house on the walls. So when you give it an authentic public product, students really step it up and create high quality projects. You should see continuous reflection along the way. That goes back to the diagram we saw with the reflection built in at the benchmarks. And it probably looks like controlled chaos. If you are an administrator and you walk into the classroom for just a few minutes, it might look chaotic with students doing different things, but it's controlled chaos, or it should be if it's high quality. And the teacher knows what's going on. Students are working together and collaborating, but each group may be at a different place. There might be little workshops, teachers checking in with students, but that's all part of project-based learning. That's normal. Okay, any questions here before we move on? I do want to add that high quality project-based learning is more than just dioramas or trifolds or glue sticks and scissors. And at that same time, that translates into the techie version of that. It's more than just flashy presentations, fancy PowerPoints and Google Slides and Prezis. If students are doing that as their end product and presenting to their class, it's not super high quality and not super relevant. Okay. I like this quote, memory is the residue of thought. So if students are really thinking in depth and having that active exploration and inquiry piece, as we talked about in the chat, then they're going to remember what they learned. It's not just memorization for a test, but they're really thinking, and that's how they'll remember. And that's how they'll end up passing the test, because they remember what they learned through these projects. Okay, so how is project-based learning rigorous and how is it relevant? There's this nice little chart in the Rigorous PBL by Design book on page 21. I'll show it here. Ooh, I think I scanned in a copy of this at some point. But the rigor, and these are all elements from the gold standards of PBL. The challenging problem or question, that sustained inquiry, that creates rigor. Authenticity, having a real authentic product, creates rigor. It makes it more rigorous than just creating a little diorama for your classroom. Reflection makes it rigorous. It helps students think deeply by reflecting. The critique and revision is also rigorous because they have to think about how to make something better and improve it, and that deepens their learning and understanding. And again, the public product relates back to the authenticity, making the project even more rigorous. A lot of those relate to the relevance as well. Student voice and choice, like we talked about here, somebody highlighted as being very important, creates relevance for students. If they have a say in what they're doing, it's relevant to them. The authenticity creates relevance to it. The topic may not be as relevant to the student, but when it's real and it's an authentic purpose, it's a relevant project and they still buy into it, even if it's not around an idea that they love necessarily. Reflection creates relevance for the students because they're reflecting on their own learning and who they are. Critique and revision, same thing. Public products, same thing. And the adult connections, that work-based learning really makes it relevant to the real world. If you have any other ideas for how project-based learning is rigorous and or relevant, please add them to the chat. But we're going to move on because it's 4:10 and I want to make sure we get through everything. But we are coming towards the end here. So what needs to be in place for project-based learning to be high quality? First, a growth mindset. And this is where a shift in mindset comes along. And this needs to be in place for the teacher in the classroom first and foremost. And if an administrator is looking to have high quality project-based learning at their school, they need to have a growth mindset. Because if they're not in that right mindset, then it will filter down and they're not going to see high quality project-based learning. And we'll talk more about a growth mindset on the next slide. The culture needs to be right for PBL. And again, both in the classroom and at the school. So if you can't control your whole school, if you're a teacher in the classroom, you can create this growth mindset culture in your classroom by doing activities that foster collaboration, that foster working together, not judging each other, doing critique and revision. The more you do this kind of stuff, the better your students get at it, the more they work together, the more they give feedback to each other, the better the culture in your classroom will be and the better your project-based learning will be. But again, you have to have that mindset that there's room for error on both your part and the student's part, that it's okay to take a risk, you and your students, and it's okay if that risk fails for you and your students. As the teacher, you need to design and plan. If you just think of a project and you jump in without designing it or planning it, it might flop. You need to make sure you put in the time to design it and plan it, especially in the beginning. And the better you get at that, the less time it will take and the less detailed you'll need to be in your designing and planning. You should continually reflect. Your students should continually reflect. That goes with that growth mindset. And that's part of what needs to happen for project-based learning to be high quality. And it needs to be a culture where it's okay to take risks. Again, both in the classroom and if you're an admin, if you can create a school culture where you encourage your teachers to take risks and to try something new, where it's okay if it flops, then down the road, you're going to get really high quality project-based learning because there will be time for those teachers to take risks, learn from their errors, take risks again, and build good projects. Fear for teachers and administrators is normal. Administrators, coaches, you have the opportunity to take away some of that fear. If you're setting up an environment where you're letting your teachers know that it's okay to take a risk and that their project might not be great, but you'll learn from it together, then you can take away some of that fear. I want to read a little quote to you from this Dive into Inquiry book. Trevor McKenzie says, "My advice to you is threefold. First, think about where you'd like to be in a few years. Ask yourself what kind of a classroom you want for your students, and keep this classroom in mind as you move forward into adopting an inquiry model as your own." Same thing for project-based learning model. Second, take small steps initially. Tinker with what you already have. Reflect on how it went afterwards. Third, continue to stretch your understanding of inquiry, project-based learning, to best meet the needs of your own learners. I really like that quote. So that's part of what needs to be in place. And if we look deeper at a growth mindset, and those of you that were at Educating for Careers, most of you were, this reminds me of the keynotes. We had Allison Levine talking about how complacency will kill you. For her, literally, we went on the mountain. If she was complacent or her team was complacent, they could end up dying. And she talked about how you need to have a growth type of mindset and not be complacent. And that first keynote, Dan Thurman talked about going off balance on purpose to grow and not staying in one spot, but getting yourself off balance on purpose to move forward. And this is a nice little graphic. Again, if you, oh no, it's not linked. I can share the PNG of this with you. I thought I linked it, but I don't. Of the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. So if we look at the bottom, mistakes, a fixed mindset, people hate making mistakes. They try to avoid making them. Or if you have a growth mindset, you treat them as learning opportunities. When you get feedback, a fixed mindset tends to take it personally or get defensive. I am sometimes guilty of this. I have to remember to keep an open mindset when I get feedback. And I need to like getting feedback and using it to learn. Challenges. People with fixed mindsets tend to give up and check out when something becomes really challenging. And growth mindset, they persevere, work through it, they show more grit. Effort, a fixed mindset, something you do when you're not good. And growth mindset, an important part of learning. The main concern for fixed mindset, how they look performance focus. So their main concern is how they look. Their focus is on their performance. And a growth mindset, their main concern is learning and getting better. The focus is on the process. Skills and intelligence, fixed mindset, it's what you have. You have what you have. It's set. Growth mindset, your skills and intelligence can be grown and developed. This really should be in place with a PBL mindset. Growth mindset and PBL mindset to me go hand in hand. Okay, and we're going to come up on a section to pause and reflect here in a minute, so bear with me. This graphic is from the Empower book, and the artist, was talking about, drew his fears when he was trying to empower students. And these were some of his fears, which are very often the same fears for people trying out project-based learning the first time. These are totally normal fears to have. You might be afraid that your principal will judge you for what you're doing, that it might get too loud in your classroom. Kids might talk the whole time. Kids might be off task. You might be afraid that you won't be able to track how your students are doing if they're doing different things, that they might fail the test, that you might not be able to predict where you would be going, that it might not fit the standards, that it might take up too much time or feel like a gamble, or students might stop working, or that things might get chaotic. These fears are all normal, and I'm not going to spend time talking about each one. My suggestion is to dive in and jump in and start doing, and your fears will go away as you do it. Okay, whew. Let's take a minute to pause and reflect on everything you just saw and heard, and think about, what are your thoughts now on the mindset that is needed in order to implement project-based learning? What kind of mindset do you think there needs to be to implement project-based learning well? And go ahead and add this to the chat. I'll type this question up since it's not on the page. I'll put a little note up for you. Okay, here we go. What are your thoughts on the mindset that is needed to implement project-based learning well? Add to chat. Let's make this bigger. And I'll put a little timer on for a couple of minutes so you can think about this. All right, so far we have Carrie being willing to take a risk, being able to be on the journey with students, and being okay with controlled chaos. Absolutely. That it might be a little messy in the beginning, but worth the risk. Definitely. Also might be scary in the beginning, but again, worth the risk. You can research the data on project-based learning. I'm not going to go through all the data with you about how it works and why it works, but it's definitely worth the risk. And Elizabeth also agrees with Carrie. Those are great. Thank you. If you have any thoughts on this, feel free to add them to the chat as we go on. Okay, I'm going to get on my soapbox just for another minute because I really want to reinforce that project-based learning is really not just about a teaching methodology. It's not what you do, it's who you are. It's the mindset you have. I feel like project-based learning isn't just in the classroom for me. It's how I live my life. It's that growth mindset, thinking about not just giving all the answers and telling people what to do, but having that learning being the journey along the way. You know, they say it's not about your destination, it's the journey. That to me is all part of project-based learning. So it's not just a teaching technique or a method, it's a mindset, a teaching and learning mindset. And I strongly believe that this is true if you want to see high quality project-based learning. And if you're not seeing high quality project-based learning, it might be because the teacher is purely doing it as a teaching method versus having the right mindset to implement it well. And it's not just a teaching mindset, it's a learning mindset about how we learn as adults. That growth mindset, again, strongly relates to it. And you can Google ways to grow a growth mindset. That's possible. If you have a fixed mindset, you can have a growth mindset. And I do have one more quote from, which one is this? Dive into Inquiry. This is actually from the foreword, so it's not from the author. It's from Alec Curios, who wrote the foreword. I probably am not saying the name right, but it isn't just an isolated approach to planning a single activity. Instead, it necessitates a major shift in the way we think about teaching and learning, and this type of shift doesn't come from a simple checklist or step-by-step guide. So this leads us into shifting our way of thinking, which goes to change. And there's three main different types of change. There's developmental change, transitional change, and transformational change. Transformational is the most challenging. It's that shift in mindset and culture. And that is often what is needed for people, teachers, administrators, educators, to change their way and practice into a project-based learning mindset. It's often transformational because they need to change their mindset and the culture of their classroom or their school. Transitional replaces what is with something new, so it's not as hard. And then developmental is the simplest kind of change. It's improving what one is already doing. It's nothing new. This article that links to has some information about the three different types of change, and it's from like a business point of view, but it's completely relevant to education. And I won't go into reading all of it, but if you want to read more about the different types of change, it's a nice little article. And I do have a question for you to reflect on regarding change. And let me pull up the poll. Oops, sorry. Here we go. Okay, what kind of change, and you can see the question in this box, what kind of change do you think needs to take place for yourself or your school or your organization, if you're regional, in order to implement better quality project-based learning? Do you think you need a transformational change, a transitional change, or a developmental change? Maybe you feel like you already have the right mindset. You just need to improve what you're doing. That would be developmental. Or transitional, that you're replacing project-based, or you're replacing what you're doing in the classroom with project-based learning, but you have the right mindset and the right culture. Or transformational, you are a traditional teacher. You think traditionally in terms of giving students the information and testing them, or that's how your teachers are teaching, and there needs to be some big transformational changes at your school or in your classroom in order to make project-based learning work and be high quality. Ooh, I should broadcast the results. But again, these are anonymous. So we have two people thinking transitional change needs to happen and one developmental. That's good. I think I see a lot of transformational change that needs to take place. And if you're not at that point, that's great. That means you've already crossed one barrier. Okay. And if you have any questions about change, you can feel free to ask about them. All right, so we're coming towards the end here, which is good because we've got 5 minutes. So this is a list of resources from the presentation, and I'm going to share with you the presentation link. Here we go. So this link, if you click on it, you should be able to click browse to, you should have access to this Google slide presentation. I will also share this out with you probably next Monday, along with a recording of the webinar and a survey for you to give feedback on the webinar so that we can improve our technical assistance. So this presentation is a Google slide presentation and is available to you, and this slide has all of the links to the resources throughout the presentation so that you don't need to go back onto each slide and click through. And then there's some PBL planning tools. I didn't talk about these at all, but these are here for you. There's different planning guides and some templates to plan projects, and they align with the different ideas we looked at from High Tech High, New Tech High, Buck Institute, and there's some great resources. Again, I feel like you need to figure out what works best for you and use what's best for you, and feel free to modify anything because we're all different and we need to use what works best for us. That's why I'm giving you a lot. And then here are some extra resources. There's the digital resources from this rigorous PBL by Design book. There's another rubric from Buck Institute and some protocols for looking at student work and more protocols from High Tech High. And let's see, we have a question. Have you seen a model where there is support for teachers who need to take their ideas projects to the next level, or something to help provide guidance as they plan? Yeah, the 6 A's project idea rubric is great to self-reflect and looking at taking your project to the next level. If you go through and analyze your project using that rubric, 6 A's project idea rubric, is to assess a project idea, not student work. So that can be helpful. I am also here to help and support. My role includes being able to do that exact thing. I can come in and meet or do a virtual meeting to talk with a teacher or a team and talk through a project and brainstorm ideas together about how to take it to the next level. I can even come out and do observations and reflections with that teacher. And I can help planning as well. So I can individually support anyone who needs it, or group support for a school, which leads to, we'll go back to that, upcoming professional development. There's a link for customized, this says PBL training and continued coaching, but you can fill this out if you want. Maybe it's not PBL training and continued coaching, but what you're talking about, support for taking a project to the next level. Or you can contact me, or we can stay on this chat together and figure out what that looks like. But before we leave, it's 4:29. If you could take a moment to reflect and add to the chat, how do you think you will utilize what you learned from this webinar? So before you go, if you could take a moment to add this in, and then as you do, feel free to head on out. It's just about 4:30 and I don't want to hold you longer. So thank you for your time. And I'm curious to see how you all will utilize what you learned. And you have access to this presentation, and I'll send it to you for the upcoming PD and all of the resources. And I see many of you are typing, so I hope you gained some good takeaways and that you'll leave really with a growth mindset, or a want to have a growth mindset in order to implement project-based learning well. And understand that it's not just a teaching method. And Carrie, great, yeah. Go ahead and send a follow-up email and we can figure out what that looks like. So Carrie used the number of resources provided and work toward planning with mindset in mind. I think that's huge. You're right, Carrie. If we jump in and plan, we need to have the right mindset when we plan. And Elizabeth, I'm hopeful that I can keep these ideas in mind when planning my lessons. Also, there were many resources for the teachers we work with. Great. Excellent. Thank you, guys. Oh, yes. Happy International Women's Day. Oh, thank you for saying something I totally forgot. I think some people have left already, but those of you that are on, happy International Women's Day. And thank you. Thank you for your time and your growth mindset for being here. Okay. Goodbye, guys. I'm going to end the recording.